part 2 of lecture 1. So we're going to have a quick look at the effects of radiation, this is just a brief look, and this will be covered in a bit more detail as we go through the semester. So radiation toxicity or radiation sickness can be looked at different levels. So the molecular level, so DNA, proteins, subcellular, so the membranes and chromosomes within a cell. At a cellular level, so stopping the cell dividing and the cell losing function. Tissue or organ that is made up of the cells, so the organ might stop working or be inhibited. The whole body, so that could be like death of the individual or cancer, or even in the population, so there can be genetic effects of radiation. And we'll cover this through the semester. So the chain of events, which from the initial radiation interaction to the final effect can be like very quick, so it goes from like 10 to the minus 15 or 10 to the minus 18 seconds up to years. So let's have a look at the timeline of how things occur. So in the first around about 10 to the minus 15 seconds, when radiation is incident on a person. So the first thing we have is the physical phase. So this is the interaction of the radiation with the matter, the formation of radicals, and that can sort of lead to damage to the cell. Then there's a chemical phase, so that's damage caused by these radicals, which interacts with the DNA within the cell. There can be enzyme reactions and other chemical reactions. So that occurs about 10 to the minus 10 to about a second, roughly. And then there's the biological phase, which is the actual observable effects on the organism. And this can be hours to years, or minutes to years, or seconds to years. So let's have a little bit of a look at some cell information. So human cells can be either somatic cells or germ cells. So cells propagate through division, so it's called mitosis for somatic cells and meiosis for germ cells. When somatic cells divide, they form two new cells, each with the same chromosome complement as the original cell. So those new cells then undergo further division as time goes on, and that's how the cell's population keeps going. So the cell cycle, like the life cycle of the cell, I guess, can be split up into different times. So we're starting with the mitosis. That's where the cell division takes place. So we have the two new cells being formed. Then the cells live for a little while. So there's a time gap. So this is gap G1, and it depends on the type of cell. How long that lasts for. Then there's the S phase, which is the DNA synthesis. So the DNA is copying itself, making a duplicate of the DNA for the two new cells. Then there's a second time gap where the cell, rests, and then with the two DNAs, the cell divides into two new cells. In general, cells are most sensitive to radiation in this phase here, during the division phase. DNA. So DNA consists of a double helix, so it's like a ladder with some rungs between it, and that's wound up into a helix, and it's got sugar phosphate strands connected to each other through, so these are sugar phosphate strands, and they're connected via these base pairs, so like that's the rod of the ladder, and I guess, and that's the steps of the ladder. So they can be GNC or ANT, the base pairs. So all, excuse me, yeah, so all of these are acids. So that's basically how the DNA is made up. So, oops, sorry. If we say that an organism's received an absorbed radiation dose, it means that there's been energy deposited. So much of the deposited energy causes excitation, and it normally just de-excites without ionisation. So it just goes away pretty quickly. When ionisation does occur, it can cause molecular change and thus could result in damage to the cell. So damage to cells can result in a few different possible outcomes. The first is that the injured or damaged cell just repairs itself and then continues on as if nothing happened, so there's no residual change. The other thing is the cell might die and be replaced through normal biological processes, or maybe not be replaced. Or otherwise the cell might incorrectly repair itself, resulting in a viable cell, but it's modified or mutated, and then that will go on to divide into other mutated cells. So for many years, so this third one is generally considered to be the cause of later on cancer. So many years of studies have shown that young and dividing cells are more radiosensitive than mature cells, and therefore, as a result of this, you see around hospitals and stuff, there's often more attention paid to radiation safety for children and pregnant women than other members of the population.